friends. Welcome to episode 6 of the Never for Nothing podcast with Susannah Baker. We thank you for joining us in these episodes. It's been amazing all the way through the 5th episode as we've gotten to hear a little bit about Jason. We've gotten to hear a little bit about Susannah. And really, in this episode, we're going to talk about healing and repair for the anxiously ambivalent attachment style. So this is going to be super helpful. I can't help but say, guys, I've been thinking about that time that Jason, you ran away at Astroworld. It's hilarious. I mean,
it wasn't hilarious in the moment.
Oh man, it was hilarious. I've been going back and forth, and I just remember. Because I've been there. And if you're listening from another part of the country, just insert a theme park. Except just add more dirt. With Astroworld
and sweat, hot humidity,
flat and hot.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah. And imagine it's your theme park, but it's 200 degrees, right. And it's really dirty. Anyway,
it sounds like hell.
But
version of
Well, so that my dad was like, that's my dad's version of hell is Disney World with no exits. So that's basically his 1-minute description. Anyhow, the word picture was great because you were not only lost, you were really lost. You were wanting to be lost. So just great. Coming back to that today, we're going to be talking about not lost, but not a thing that Susannah. Not a time when she was lost, but a thing that she lost specifically. Right. I think that's going to help us illustrate the point. Yes. Susannah, tell us about these crazy things.
So we've been married for, I don't know if we've even said this officially, but we've been married 21 years. Yeah. November 3rd of 2001, and so for our 20th wedding anniversary, a little over a year ago, Jason gave me a beautiful pair of sapphire earrings. I love sapphires, and they were these beautiful earrings. And, you don't get these special pieces of jewelry often, so they're very precious and special. Okay. So it was a Friday night, and
So give us the visual, sorry.
What
do these look like? I mean, just so we
sapphires surrounded by these little bitty diamonds.
Yeah, and so the sapphires are red, right?
Yeah, blue.
Okay, yeah,
Come on.
Sorry.
You need to give Star. This is your
I was just clarifying for the audience, not for me. So we have a visual.
So these blue sapphire earrings with little bitty diamonds around them. And so we were going to a fundraiser that you had to dress up and be fancy. But it's Friday night. I think one of our girls had a lacrosse game. Another one had basketball. Another one had soccer. I mean, we were supposed to be in like 5 different places at one time. And I really had no business going to this thing. I should have said, Jason, you go. I've got to manage what's going on here. But I was stressed out, and I'm getting dressed as fast as I can. I put my dress on. I put my earrings in, and we go. We get to we go inside. This is at the hotel downtown.
Yeah, the
Hilton Americas. And we're walking through the lobby, and I kept pulling on my dress. I was like, why is it? Incredible. And I'm like, I put my dress on backwards.
Yeah.
My dress is on backwards.
Yeah. Awesome.
So I go
This is on the heels of me, again, remembering, lessons from the past. What do I need to say?
Yeah, and I'm running. I was late.
And I said to you, I didn't say anything about you being late, but I did say, you look great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So of course, an hour later, I realized her dress is on backwards. But right. Please.
So I go into the bathroom, go into a stall, pull it over my head, readjust. Now I'm super flustered. We walk in, we eat dinner, we go home. By this point, it's like 10 o'clock at night. I go to get undressed on a Friday.
And we're exhausted.
I go in and I look in the mirror. I have one earring in.
No.
The other earring is missing. And we live about 20, 30 minutes from downtown.
Let's call it 30.
I go into, now, 20 years ago, this would have been World War III.
Oh, man.
I'm asking my husband, who gets up at 4:30 a.m., to come drive me down to downtown to look for my earring that I am convinced I lost in the bathroom when I pulled my dress over my head.
I mean, that's a great deduction.
That's a valid point.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And to his credit, I go, babe, I lost my earring. And he just looked at me and he's like, come on, let's get in the car. No explosion, no anything.
Progress.
Baker.
So we drive down. They're vacuuming. I search everywhere. Search in the bathroom.
That's your worst fear, is the vacuum.
Totally. Search under the tables. I mean.
On all fours in the bathroom, talking to the general manager. I mean.
Nothing. Yeah. Nothing. So we get in the car. We're going home. And all of a sudden, I remember that I had tried on 2 different, one earring in one ear and one in the other, to see which one, I was going to wear.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure I was like, you know what? I think I took that earring out and I never put anything back in.
Yeah.
So I don't think I had 2 earrings in the whole dinner. I think I was wearing one. So I go home. I go to my closet, and sure enough, there are 2 earrings.
And at 1 o'clock in the morning, we found the earring right where it had been for
the
weeks.
whole time.
Yeah.
The whole
So I
time.
put my dress on backwards. I was wearing 1 earring through the whole dinner, made my husband drive downtown again to look. We get back home, and I can say we didn't laugh about it like 48 hours later. We laughed about it then. And we both had made so much progress. He was so patient. He was so sweet.
An extended date night.
An extended date night. But
with the crazy dresser.
with a crazy dresser.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. And I just realized it was a funny, not so funny incident of realizing how far that we had come in
mile
our
marker.
responses and reactions
So
to each
good,
other.
yeah.
They were tempered with so much more grace
Man,
and
that's
love,
so good. Yeah.
which was great. 21 years later. It only took us 21 years.
Yeah.
So how did you get to that point? Let's talk about
right.
the restorative work that needs to happen with that ambivalent attachment style.
So I think for the ambivalent, anxious person, that healing really looks like slowing down and looking at your triggers. And Jason mentioned this for the avoidant person as well, but like we talked about in the last episode, the anxious person, you feel like you don't have a choice. When you feel like you're about to be abandoned or someone is in the process of abandoning you, you get really angry and say things you regret and don't mean, or that sound so like ultimatums. You always, you never.
Yeah, these absolutes.
These absolutes. And healing looks like realizing you have a choice. You don't have to say those things. That really, the reactions you've had, really that probably go back to your parents and that have been passed on to your spouse and then to your kids and then to your friends, those are what I call a rut. But really there's a whole field of possibilities. You have a choice. And a lot of times it's just taking time to slow down and go, okay, what are the things that really trigger me when I have those explosions? And for me, a lot of it centered around, I think that we're pretty good about big moments of connection, whether that's date nights. We are not a once a week regularity, but once a month, let's say. Date nights, or we're great about going away for our anniversary every year or on summer vacation, with our kids and getting away for a night or two while we're there. But it's the everyday connection that's hard for me, and especially for the anxiously attached person that lives in fear of abandonment and rejection. Those everyday connection points are maybe even more important than the big connections. And for the avoidant person, he's like, anniversary trip, check.
See you in 6 months.
See you in 6 months.
Mission
Earring,
accomplished.
check. And in the meantime, we're doing life with 4 kids, and he gets up early. We've talked about this before in season 1. It's like when he's tired and it's time to go to bed.
Out from under his one sheet that he sleeps under.
His one sheet, sarcophagus style.
Yeah, that's right.
At 4:30 a.m. And so he is ready at 9:30, you know, and I'm still
It's lunchtime.
doing things with the people in our house. And I don't mind staying up later. I mean, or doing that. I get it. But I do want him to come and say, good night. I love you. And for so many years, I would go upstairs and he would just be passed out asleep. And I was like, what? No, good night? No, I love you. So I had to think through those. And then he would wake up the next morning and I'd be mad at him. He's like, what have I done? But really thinking through those everyday connection points. And I had a counselor tell me this, that they're it's when you get up in the morning, before one of you leaves, the first one of you leaves for work or for the day or whatever, when you come home, and before bed. And if you can think through those really rituals, they're like bookends to your day. First with the Lord, how are you interacting time with the Lord, and then with each other, and making sure that other person knows you're an essential part of my day.
Yeah.
And I need you because God has made it this way. This is good that I need you, and I love you, and I'm here for you. That is medicine to the anxious person's heart on a regular day in, day out basis.
That's good.
And it's the little things. But when you find yourself exploding, stop and go,
Yeah.
what is feeling like rejection to me? How can we rework this?
Mm-hmm. Were those routines at the beginning, Jason, were those, obviously, would they feel smothering? I mean, was it, tell me about
that was exhausting to me. It's funny. It's even as I was sitting here, I was remembering, I was probably in our first 6 months of marriage. And I was just like, just help me understand. You remember this? And you're like, well, a woman just needs to know, or someone wired like me needs to understand that you're thinking about me. And I go, well, when I took you to get that nice dress on Saturday, like, what did that mean? And she's like, that's like, if you're looking for like a scoring system, like that's a point, like that was a great point. And I go, well, then what about the note I left on your windshield? She goes, same thing. That's a point. I go, wait a second, that dress costs $100, or whatever. She's like, it's the same. Like, I just need to know that I'm on your mind.
And then you're like, wait a second.
Yeah, this is...
Let's reverse engineer this thing.
I gotta do this
second.
more than once on Saturdays.
I immediately went to Office Max and bought 50 pounds of sticky notes. But
I was like, that's right.
Yeah, so I did. It felt overwhelming for someone that avoided, right? Avoided touch and connection and intimacy and being known. That was, to someone like me, that was exhausting and scary.
Yeah. And I think because it still is something we have to work on, and I have to manage my expectation, like being mindful of when you are in seasons of exhaustion, or work is more than normal, or right now you're working on your master's program and you've been up late, like back off on the, needing you to be present to me right now. But I think just being willing for me to articulate my needs. Because there's something about the anxiously attached person that thinks you should just know my needs.
That's right.
That's not fair. So
even even going into a setting like Thanksgiving, which you mentioned recently, where you're able to say on the front end, like, and it would be helpful if we sat next to each other at Thanksgiving meal.
Yeah. Yes, I had to say.
Yeah,
truly,
but spelling out those expectations where you can develop some habits around those things and just understand, hey, this is really important to me.
Yes.
In this environment
yes.
that creates anxiety in me, this is important. And those are things that were helpful to me. Again, confusing at times, but really helpful. So outlining those expectations early, but not with a heavy hand, just graciously saying, hey, this would really help.
Right. So, being willing to stop, look at your triggers, know you have a choice, really think through, how would I like to respond? And what are the simple things that I can ask my spouse to do to help me know you're not going anywhere? I'm an essential part of your day, especially if you're married to someone who's avoidant.
Yeah.
And then stop provoking and doing things to get the avoidant person to answer the question, are you going to abandon me now?
Interesting.
With our broken engagement, I think about that. I mean, you brought that up so frequently early in our marriage, about this broken engagement. Of course, we were 5 years married, or whatever the timeline was. And I just was always wondering, like, what's the big deal here? But just this idea of her doubts around the relationship early on in our marriage, and understanding that was a sensitivity of hers. I didn't understand that because we had already been married, what for me felt like an eternity, right? Like 5 years. But the reality is we were just getting started. But knowing and developing an appreciation and empathy around your sensitivity around those things helped me understand you better.
Yeah.
And of course we're I think way past that now.
Yes.
But,
praise God.
Yeah.
I think too, this was a big one for me. Pause before noticing. So much of the time, it's that overwhelming need to feel connection and to feel known for the anxiously attached person. And I finally had to realize, and unfortunately, often it happens when you lose a relationship that's important to you, and you realize people can't give me what I need. But there has to be this point where you pause and realize, I can never get from anyone, not my spouse, not my friends, not my parents, no one, the validation and the connection I'm looking for.
And that's the revelation.
That's the revelation. That's the grace. It has to come from the Lord. And when that realization happened is when, the groundbreaking shift happened, like 15 years into our marriage, where I stopped, because it was like Groundhog Day a little bit. Even though we were making progress, I still was going to Jason to try to satisfy that urge, that need for connection I had. I had to get to the point where I was like, it can't come from him. And you know that in your head, but knowing it in your heart, that's the gospel. And coming face to face with Jesus Christ, where he satisfies all your connection needs. And nothing promoted healing in our marriage greater than that.
Yeah.
Then when I started finally saying, I'm going hard after God. And it let him off the hook in a way that then he did want to meet my connection needs in a way that he couldn't before, because I was like holding on to him in a way that I hold on to a lifesaver and we're drowning, you know? And when I began to shift my attention to the Lord, it just brought so much healing into my relationship with Jason at a level we had never experienced before. And I really found that healing through prayer and through the Word of God, and specifically through the Psalms. They were the medicine cabinet of my soul. And that really is the story of the book and in the workbook and season 1 of the podcast. But it's not a small thing. When I say, like, find connection in the Lord, find it in times of reading his word and prayer, that's not just trite. That was your lifeline. That was my lifeline. And that's when things really started to change. And then it wasn't that I had to stop and realize too, my whole life I had spent chasing people just a little bit out of reach, because that was familiar. That's what was the dynamic in my home growing up. And Jason was always just a little bit out of reach. And this is the cool thing. Like, did we marry each other out of wholeness and being secure people? And no, we were so broken. Like, I married him out of a rut and a broken dynamic in my heart. Yet he still was the right person. I still was the right person, because that's how God works. That's his grace.
It's like our counselor said, you have two broken people, and think by bringing them together, you create one big whole person.
Right.
And the reality is you just double the brokenness coming into a marriage, and it's tough. Sorry to interrupt.
No. But I think it was finally understanding that pattern in me, that I kept chasing people just a little bit out of reach, and stopping and saying, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to chase him. I'm going to pursue the Lord and become a safe person. And then naturally you start to relate to other people around you in a whole new way, out of a place of security, stability, and safety. And you invite wholeness in your relationships that way. But it just took a long time to get there. But when you are an anxiously attached person, you have to realize you have to stop doing what feels so familiar, which is chasing people a little bit out of reach, stopping and being willing to embrace maybe a season of loneliness, pursuing the Lord, letting him heal your heart, and then inviting safe relationships in. And your marriage, that's when our marriage dynamic really started to change.
Mm-hmm. So good.
And it always ends up being the most unlikely ways and the most unlikely people. Not always, but it can feel like that, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as we close this episode, I wanted to be able to say, or want to be able to probe just deeper for a couple minutes. You had mentioned your counselor several times, your counseling. Something. What would you tell that couple that maybe is on the edge of doing that, pursuing that type of relationship with a third party, that empathetic listener? I mean, what encouragement could you bring? Maybe they're afraid of, what's going to be like. Maybe that person is afraid of, it's all going to be my fault, or it's, my spouse would never go. I mean, what are some encouragement that maybe you could provide to that couple about hopping into counseling, hopping into that kind of relationship?
I think that
because it's stigmatized,
yes, big time.
So
it is. I think number one, and I heard this, I don't know, I can't remember, maybe it's from Kurt Thompson, but for counseling to really make improvements or changes, you have to go consistently for a year, because your brain, new neural net or pathways are created in your brain as you tell your story to an empathetic listener, and they invite you to hear it through a different lens. it's true, but it's slow work. And that's why you have to go consistently. You have to be telling your story to someone who invites you to hear it back. So I think number one, you got to go to counseling to be telling your story to someone who can invite you to examine your triggers, help you think through how would you like to respond, help you do that work of securing your attachment in the Lord. Mm-hmm. But you have to first be doing it with the Lord. And we're going to talk about that in the next 2 episodes. Yeah. But doing it with the Lord in your times of prayer and in the Word. And then I would highly suggest doing it with a counselor on a regular basis. I went for every week for a year. Mm-hmm. And then on a monthly, like on a routine basis.
Yes. Check out.
And Jason does too.
Jason, tell us what would you say to the reluctant person?
About counseling?
Yeah.
Man, especially for men, what do they say? The sin of Adam, right, was passivity. And I just think that men need to lead, and they need to lead in this area. And so, I was about to pull up a proverb just to say, there's a lot of great scripture just around the importance of good counsel, right? And so it has been a game changer for me. I think about the timing of all these things, including my introduction to my pastor friend, and who's out of state. And just by the way, as God would have it, just if ever you think God's not in the details, a former pastor, clinical psychologist, father of 3 girls, not 4, wow. And who are all much younger than mine, but just his insight and his wisdom and the empathy and patience, but just, I love that. And again, he's always pointing my heart back to Jesus, and which has been such an amazing thing. But to lead, and then also to say, like, he has become one of my dearest friends. I mean, I love him. Yeah. And so
it's going to be okay.
But and I'd say just one other thing is just most people, men and women, but I would say especially men, don't start something new for fear of starting poorly. And I think that's a really important thing. So to get in that with the commitment that you're going to do it for a set period of time, and to also go into it prepared. Mm-hmm. That would be the last thing I would say. Mm-hmm. Go into it prepared. Whenever I get with my friend, I always talk to Susannah ahead of time, and we'll say, I'm meeting with him tomorrow. Okay. Is there anything you think I need to address? And
she's like, how much time you got?
How much? You got an hour? But she'll always give me a nugget or two, oftentimes something I'm not thinking about, or something that I'm not even able to see. And so that's been a real big help.
Yeah, that's so great. So great. Well, so much great wisdom here in this episode. Y'all, thanks for being so vulnerable. Thanks for being honest about your journey and also counseling journey, and just really learned a lot about from Susannah and from your experience on really the repair work behind the anxious ambivalent attachment style. We're headed to some great material in these last 2 episodes of season 2. Just can't wait for you to be a part of things. So we'll leave it there today on the Never for Nothing podcast with your host, Susannah Baker.